Yeah, that made me a little bit nervous because it was so fantastic. And although this isn't my first time speaking in public, it's the first time speaking about this particular subject in public. And I just thought it was quite maybe a bit interesting for you to hear about working on the railway industry full-time. This is my 30th anniversary of holding down a job in an environment that's quite challenging, well, very challenging for somebody with Asperger's who's on the autistic spectrum like myself. And although I worked on the YTS in Liverpool prior to joining the railways 30 years ago this year in this very town in Reading in 1989, prior to that I was on the YTS and in the voluntary sector. So, you know, railways has been in my life from a very early age. And I started on the Western region of British Rail in 1989 in January, and I came here, one of the reasons I came here was because the area management in Liverpool, area manager Merseyrail, they were actually looking for their employees from an older pool of people rather than people who were like teenagers, 17, 18 years of age. And the reason that they wanted to employ people who were older family, and they were men in those days predominantly, who they felt they were more trustworthy, that they wouldn't go sick to watch football and things. So it was very hard at my age to actually be taken seriously and get a job. Right. So I moved here because one of the things as well, I wanted to start before I was 18. It's really bizarre, but it was one of those sort of Aspie things that I told everyone I was going to get a job as a junior and start before I was 18, and it just became an obsession. It was just a really weird obsession that I had to do, and I did it. I started 2.5 weeks before my 18th birthday, and it was amazing, and I just told myself I was going to do this. I don't know why I made it into such a big deal, but I did. And also one of the reasons I wanted to come is I'd had a fairly serious relationship for a teenager. I had a tomboy girlfriend and I got quite intense about it, and we broke up, and I just wanted a fresh start. I wanted a sense of adventure. I'd been down here before exploring the railways, quite interesting in those days, different types of locomotive and things, and I thought it would be an adventure. So I moved in with a railway family, and my landlady was actually here this morning, and obviously in those days I had no diagnosis of ASD or dyslexia or anything. I had all these comorbidities with my with Asperger's, and when I was 18 I was very immature and I wasn't streetwise at all, and I came here as a bit of a northern hick, and it was a really fast pace of life, and I really struggled to sort of fit in and adjust to the pace of life. And I didn't really have much of a life outside of the railway. I just didn't have time for it. Very long shifts, very demanding, and I see all this wonderful sort of support going on today with autism support and LGBT support, and I thought if only I had that in my day when I was here, I could have made a life for myself, maybe outside of work, and that would have enabled me to put down roots and stay. And also, I was getting teased, and I suppose that's all it really was teasing about being northern. But I was so sensitive in those days. I just took it all to heart, and I don't think it would be allowed now, because it was, because of the way the dignity at work. Because everyone teased me, because there used to be a woman, I don't know if you remember, outside Reading Station years ago, they used to call her Peggy. Well, that was always the name for people who were sort of food, and Peggy, and she used to do these dog rolls and lardy cake, and somebody sent me out to get dog rolls, and they said they didn't want anything on them, just dog rolls, sausage, and I came back with plain bread rolls, because they said, and I just went, well, he said he didn't want, and everyone laughed at me, and I just became known as dog roll after that, and I was so sensitive. And then I found it, prior to that I'd been on a YTS scheme. So now I'd got full-time job, full-time responsibilities in a new town. I'd left behind all my support network, all my family, all my friends. There was, so much change, and I just craved and missed the familiarity so much. And it was such a big thing for me to take on. And within months I got a guards job, what was called Trainman G in those days, and so it meant that, you know, I was on the trains, I was doing what I wanted, and, you know, it's a big ambition, and I was on the local trains. I wanted to be on locomotives. I did get to go on them, and I did get to do driver's assistance role on them, which has basically been, strange as it sounds, like a fireman on a diesel locomotive, because I mean they've had to fight, you know, in those days to get, with the unions being so strong. They had 2 people on the locomotive still. But the thing was, I really wanted to be doing freight trains and being more hands-on, which really I didn't have the confidence and the ability to do. And I didn't really understand the rules of life when I was that age. And I didn't really sort of understand that management picked horses for courses. And I got quite angry that I wasn't doing exactly what I wanted, and I sort of became quite militant, and I cut off my own nose to spite my face somewhat. And, you know, there were certain types of trains I wouldn't work on because I hadn't had the full train, even though other people were working on them. So it was a little bit silly of me, really. And as I say, I got really, really homesick, and then applied for an inter-regional transfer on compassionate grounds that, you know, I wanted to go home, and I was sent to area manager Shrewsbury, area manager Chester it was, for an interview, and bizarrely I managed to sort of land, and what was that they were men in those days, get a signalman's job at Shrewsbury, and I thought that was wonderful. And unfortunately I was talking to a chap over there who runs the stand for the railway, and you know, the thing was, when I went on the course, I'd done really, really well on the guards course, but the signalman's course was very, very intense, but you had to learn how to deal with lots of different scenarios, but with slight detail differences. And I found that really, really hard to cope with, you know, and to learn. If it had been like you're doing a whole scenario and it's totally different, I think in many ways I'd have found that easier to learn and to cope with. And, you know, if a train breaks down in this circumstance, you do this. If it breaks down in that circumstance, you do this. And there's a slight detail difference. That really, really caught me out, and I didn't pass the course. And the instructor actually recognised my learning difficulties while I was there, but I was actually too embarrassed to talk about it. I just didn't want to face it, and I was too ashamed to admit it. And they said about that area manager Chester got the real telling off, and they said about coming back to Reading, and I thought, I can't do that because, you know, I left because I was so lonely and homesick. So I think at that time it was pretty horrible, because I think they were sort of going to dismiss me. But a supervisor friend of mine said that they had jobs on Merseyrail, and there was a guard's job I could have in Liverpool, but I didn't drive a car, so I ended up, as only an aspie could do, talking myself out the job when I went for the interview. And I ended up as a railman, a temporary leading railman at Ellesmere Port on the station, and I should have really applied for a crossing keeper's job that came up, because I would have really enjoyed that, because it was like a signal box. But by this time I felt quite ill in the summer of 1990 when I came back, and I'm actually convinced, you know, that I had ME and it was not diagnosed, absolutely convinced of it. And I was back to the doctor. I mean, I felt so lethargic. If a lion had come up to me, I wouldn't have had the strength to run away. You know, but all the doctors kept saying it was depression or what, and I sort of crashed. At that point it was a real low point for me, and, you know, it was low confidence, and I really, really was, you know, sort of career-wise and self-confidence-wise at rock bottom. I'd given up a really good job here. I had a degree of independence. I had my own place. I could earn as much. I could have lived at work, and then I came back up north, sort of very little money in my pocket, and living back with my parents. I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? And I felt such a failure. And but I just, when I got to 21 or 20, I just thought, well, this is for me to pull myself back, and I really started working hard to sort of rebuild a career. And eventually, after a lot of sort of applying and hard work, I got a shunter job in a place called Marsh, which is North Wales, and I actually bumped in, one of the managers was a manager I'd actually had in here when I was in Reading, and it was a bit embarrassing, but I passed my driving test, and then I did other courses. I had to learn how to technically examine the trains, and I found I was sort of resistant to change because, you know, I was getting more and more responsibilities, and this was the problem. The privatisation was coming along, and one of the advantages of working on the railway was that you had maximum demarcation in the sense it was trade unionised, you knew your role, you had a line of supervision, and I felt confident in that, and I felt I could deal with it. But with privatisation coming in, they wanted more productivity, more flexibility, multi-skilling, and I was thinking, oh my goodness, and this is when anxiety starts to kick in. How am I going to cope with these responsibilities in a safety critical environment where people's lives are at stake and everything? You know, it's so anxious, and I just wanted to be back in my comfort zone, doing a job where I knew where the boundaries and where my responsibilities began and ended. And then I went to Crewe to do a chargeman shunter's job because I thought, well, I know what I'm doing. But ironically, that was probably a low point because there was so much work to do, and I struggled so much, and actually had to ask for a transfer from there. And then I went to Ellesmere Port and Stanlow, and I worked at various yards. But I thought another story that could only happen to me was my car was off the road and I was working away in Northwich, and my boss said to me, his exact words were, I am and I'm not giving you permission to take the company van home. So I thought, he's not, he is or he isn't. And I thought, well, he said he was. So I took the company van home and I parked it outside my parents' where I'd always parked my own car, it was alright. And then I was in bed and I heard a noise and I thought, well, that sounds like my van. I thought, it must be my imagination. And I came down the next day with the keys to get in it. And it was like that Charlie said it was like, I was just holding my key and it was an empty space where my van had been, and it had been stolen. And I thought, oh no, I did tell my boss that the van's been stolen from outside my bedroom window. And it was really funny because there was a guy at work having a total meltdown when the drivers had done all these cartoons about everybody and all the bosses and left them in the van, and he was having a real meltdown in case the police found it. And I actually said to the police, I said, if you find it and find a big envelope full of cartoons, can you please destroy them before any of the bosses see them? No, we can't do that. But I thought it could only happen to me. And I went to, I was working out in Manchester after that, and I was travelling and it was so exhausting, you know, and it was so tough. And then I went to Liverpool, got fit in because I wanted to be on this autistic training. I wanted to do my job very much to the rules, and some of the guys I was working with in Liverpool, they just really wanted to wing it, you know what I mean? And I was really struggling to sort of thinking, oh, you got to do it by the... And this guy I worked with, he was a bit of a horror, and it was really tough for me to work with him. And he really cut corners, and as an Aspie, I was really awful. I was so anxious. I got so anxious all the time. I was really anxious. I can't begin to say how anxious I was about some of the things he was doing, and you know, I was really worried about it. And the funny thing is that a couple of years ago, someone messaged me on Facebook and said, oh, did you hear about your old co-worker Brian? And I went, no. He said, well, it's been in the newspaper that he's committed suicide in Walton jail because he was looking at a life sentence because he stabbed his wife through the head. And I was like, God, I worked with this guy for a couple of years every day, and he ended up putting a knife through his wife's head. So goodness knows what he'd have done to me, you know. It was pretty scary stuff. Yeah. And I was working in Edge Hill and things like that, and I used to enjoy going up in the signal box because that was what I wanted to do, and I used to pop up there, and also around about that time, one of the things I wanted to do before joining the railways, I sort of chickened out of because I thought I could never possibly do it. you know, where say people on the spectrum get fascinated by things. And when I was a child, the Falklands was always on, and it's the first news story that fascinated me. And I just remember this photograph of HMS Hermes going to the Falklands, and just being mesmerised by it. And I wanted to join the Royal Naval Reserves, and I did that. And again, when I look back and think, you know, somebody on the scale with so, you know, many autistic and Asperger's type traits, I think it was a remarkable accomplishment to work full time and be part of the Royal Naval Reserves, and sort of living my life at 100 miles an hour, fitting both in. And I went to sea on HMS Invincible, which, you know, it was like I'd accomplished that dream. And I suppose in a way it's been a checkered career, but I've managed to accomplish a lot of things I've wanted to do. I've held a job down in that role, but also, you know, it's been difficult, it's been really challenging, and now I'm in a place I really want to be career-wise, and, you know, I've got the support in place. So, you know, I really want to be able to sustain that, because one of the reasons I've actually left, one of the things I thought I'd never do was actually leave home and leave my home area. I just didn't think I had the confidence to do it. And but I did again leave home 15 years later after being in Reading. I actually upped sticks again, said goodbye to my family, friends, everybody I knew, all the familiarity, and I put everything I could possibly owned into my little Mini Cooper, but it wasn't the new big ones, it was the old ones. Just everything I could fit went with me, and I just got on the ferry and moved to Belfast and started fresh on Northern Ireland Railways. And it was a really daunting thing to start and do it all over again. And, you know, one of the things what drew me to go to Northern Ireland Railways was it was still public sector. So again, you know, I think it was more defined roles, and I felt, but in a way it was overstaffed, to quite, you know, to be honest with you. But that was what I wanted, you know, and I couldn't imagine how I could cope in any other environment where, you know, there was a high workload and a high responsibility. And there was, you know, there was trains there I liked. It was actually very similar to the types here. So in a way I felt like I was clawing some of the lost ground that I'd lost when I'd left Reading, and also wanted to prove to my family and friends and things that I was confident enough to live alone and make a go of it. And also one of the reasons I went to Northern Ireland bizarrely was my gender dysphoria. I just knew there was this huge evangelical Christian scene, and I thought if I even plug into that, I might have this road to Damascus conversion and be cured. And I say I went to Northern Ireland and I had a trip, and I saw the railways and I thought, oh, that's just like British Railways used to be. That's just wonderful, I could work here. So that, you know, I started pursuing it. Second application, I applied for a guard's job, I didn't get that, and I applied for a shunter's job and got it. And because we've just got so increasingly unhappy with working for EWS, because I say, in my own opinion, you know, things were more intense, because we lost a Royal Mail contract, and, you know, it was sort of really, they were really trying to do what everyone wants to, squeeze a quart into a pint pot. And, you know, it was a really sort of quite a stressful environment for somebody on this spectrum to be in. And so much at the time was sort of seemed like symbolic. There was like closure going on in my life in England. Like the favourite signal boxes had shut down. It sounds silly. My favourite signal boxes had shut down. My favourite dancewear shop in Chester, that was shutting down. And it was as if where I lived was sort of saying goodbye to me. You need to move on. And that was another thing that I remember as well. It was like a haunting experience, because I've always had like obsessions. That's why I wanted to work on a railway. Because people say it's a special interest or an intense interest. Like what's the word for it? Like what's the word you use to make something sound less severe? Yeah, there's a word for, you know, but I thought, well, no, it's actually
it's called a hobby.
Oh yeah, no, it was I was bloody upset. Call it what it is, an obsession. I was absolutely obsessed with trains. That's all I wanted to talk about when I was a child. Was trains. All I could think about. My parents banned me from talking about them when we went on holidays. Literally banned me and said no train talk. So it was such a big thing for me to get working in the industry that I always wanted to be in. But yeah, one of the things that I remember before I left England was walking. I was obsessed with cask beer, real ale, and Boddington's brewery just shut, and that was another sort of symbolic closure moment of wandering around this rubble of Boddington's brewery. It was one of the last trips I went on before I left to move to Northern Ireland, and I say it was all like this sort of symbolism. And I sort of, when I came to Northern Ireland, you know, I didn't really want it to be a Reading Mark II. I was really, you know, found that I was doing the same things that I did in Reading, sort of wandering around town, and I felt like a human camera, like I was just observing everyone else's life, and it was all about couples and families, and I was on my own, and I just felt like a passive observer, and everyone else had a life, and I was just detached and apart from that. But you know, work was easier, and I got involved in more sort of local things, more community things. But one of the things was really, I did actually join, I was saying looking for a cure from a gender dysphoria. I actually joined Ian Paisley's church. I didn't actually join, but I used to go. You know, and loads of people like, whoa, when I tell them that, because they just don't expect that, because it, you know, it's like real fire and brimstone stuff. And you know, life was really good, but I still missed home, and I still struggled with things. And then the inevitable happened, because although it's still public sector in Northern Ireland, they were looking to emulate what they could see on the UK mainland in terms of productivity. So they were looking over here and saying, what can we implement on Northern Ireland Railways to get more productivity from our staff? And I thought, oh no, you know what I mean? And I really hadn't put a long-term strategy in place when I moved there. I thought, I want to keep a job, I want to hold my job down, and you know, I thought about going to college and things, but I did so badly at school because of my sort of gender dysphoria. I think people thought I was sissy or was gay, and because of my autism, I had undiagnosed dyslexia and dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and people thought, oh, there's somebody who's reasonably articulate, reasonably intelligent, so they're just lazy, and that's what I was branded at school. So the whole, still to this day, formal educational environment still, you know, sort of fills me with a bit of dread, you know, so I thought I couldn't really do that. And say the restructuring started, and fortunately over time I managed to get some support in place. But you know, some key dates happened when I was there, because in 2011 I watched the programme of My Transgender Summer, which prompted me to go to my GP and get that referral to the gender identity clinic. And I was so anxious. I lived in some really tough loyalist area. I said to the doctor, please don't tell my neighbours, will you? I was so worried. And in 2012 I got to get, you know, achieve an ambition, because we were trained as depot drivers, which I never thought I'd do. So I actually got an ambition to be paid to drive trains, which I think, you know, I'm really, really chuffed to bits about. I mean, I can't, every time, I've been doing it now for several years, and every time I get in the driver's seat and drive away, okay, I'm only trundling along like at canal boat speed, but I'm still like driving this train going, winning, 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 like that. You know, stuff you teachers, stuff everybody said I couldn't do it, you know. And the year after is when I'd already met Michael, and we were a couple by 2012. So initially in 2012 it was pretty tough, because I'd come out, I'd been kicked out the Royal Naval Reserves, partly I think due to my gender dysphoria. I disclosed that, but also a lot of it was they were bringing in a lot of computer things, and you know, I'm trying to adapt and change. You know, I mean, this is only my opinion, what I say. I mean, other people might have a different take on you know, why I was having difficulties in the, you know, when things in the environments I was in. But I got the diagnosis in 2013 for Asperger's. Michael recognised it in me and said, go and get a diagnosis. And it was really weird. I just wanted to run away the night before. I get like that. I never do. And that's how I think I've dealt with so many of my difficulties and challenges in quite a hostile environment for someone on the autistic spectrum, working in the operating world of railways, where it's very much a macho do or die thing. You know, it's a man's world still, and you know, I think that's how I've been a bit like a ship, to use a naval analogy, and I just turn my bows into it, and it's really stressful. So I just go head at it. You know, that's in a way how I've coped, and it's really tough, and it's been really challenging for me to hold down a job in that sort of environment for 30 years, and I'm immensely proud of achieving that. And that's not to denigrate people who feel that, you know, I mean, possibly they can't manage that, because I know how that feels. So I'm not saying, you know, that I'm better than anybody else. And I was really worried that I might give out a wrong impression when talking about that. And the following year, after getting the Asperger's diagnosis, something happened. It was quite strange. It sort of, I didn't realise that, you know, unlike here in Northern Ireland, it's like a small world and quite closeted. And, you know, as I say, I'd been in Ian Paisley's church, I'd been in the Ulster Unionist Party, Royal Navy, I was Roman Catholic, actually converted to Protestantism on this sort of crusading journey to cure me from gender dysphoria, and it sort of got quite intense. And then this guy who knew me from the Ulster Unionist Party was a journalist, and he contacted me and said, you know, do you mind doing, if I do this piece about you? I went, oh yeah, all right, but why? I said, oh, I think your story's really interesting. I went, okay. And I met him, and I spoke to him, and this time I maybe was a little bit streetwise and laid some ground rules down about my partner and saying certain things. And I said I wanted to see it, and he said, oh, it'll probably be in a local paper, freelance journalist, mostly with the Belfast Telegraph. And he played it all down, and I went, okay. And I remember saying to him, like, you know, why do people get bad things said about them in the press? And he said, oh, they're ones that don't cooperate. And I was a bit scared at that point, you know. But he didn't, to Jew, he was really, really fair. But he said it was going to be in the paper. Then he said it was going to be in the Sun, right? Which is only, okay, it's on the Northern Ireland edition, so smaller audience, but still it was going to be the Sun newspaper. And he showed me a preview of the headline, the article, and I was happy with it. And I thought, all right. And then the night before, the Northern Ireland Assembly had sort of crashed for the upteenth time, and that nobody can remember how many times it's actually crashed. People stop counting now, because it's, you know, it's every other week. Should you go back to work, or should we have a year off, you know? I think they'd all like to be able to all get a job in the Northern Ireland Assembly and just have, like, you know, holidays that last forever. That'd be really good. Anyway, I went to them. I thought it won't be in the paper because there's far more urgent things going on, and you wouldn't believe it. I just can still see it now as I'm talking about it. I can see it clearly in my mind's eye. I walked in, and I'm not even joking, right? This is absolutely the truth. I walked into the newsagent thinking it won't be in. My goodness, scan round the papers. No. Boom! There it was, front page of the Sun newspaper, with a headline that said "Orange Man, Sash Woman," and me with my ballet photograph on the front. And it was a big headline, the full front page of the Sun. I couldn't believe it. I was so shocked. My head was reeling. And I phoned up Michael and said, it's horrible, I'm on the front page of the Sun, blah, blah, blah. And Michael said, oh, phone up Transmedia Watch. I thought, what will they do? And I got this thing into work, sat down, read it, and I thought, you know, actually that's really good what they said. It was just that head tension grabber that was the real shocker once I calmed down. And it was surreal, because these guys at work, they just, you know, weren't talking about it because they were guys and macho, and I'm sitting there, and the guy's sitting there doing the Times crossword, and I'm on the front page, and I thought, and then no one's talking about it. And in the end, I just broached the subject by the time of the afternoon. I said, I see him on the front page of the paper, and I thought, you know, yeah, and then people start to talk about it a bit. But that opened a bit of a door, and started a bit of momentum. And I found myself getting involved in, like, LGBT trans activism and speaking a little bit about it. And we ended up being made into a little film. We got married, and this guy made a film about us, a graduate. He was doing doctorate in film, wasn't he? And then he made a film about us called Butterflies. And then I got contacted by the BBC, and I ended up being on Victoria Derbyshire. And then Stephen Nolan, I don't know if you've heard of him, he does some chat shows on Radio 5, but big in Northern Ireland, did like a documentary on the TV, and it was like, I think it was weird because I was like enjoying the attention, but in a way, like I'd always shunned it, but you know, you sort of want something and not want it, you know what I mean? In a way I would have been quiet, but somebody had been bullied at school and everyone thought everyone hated me at school, and all of a sudden, like I was sort of had a media voice, and in local media, and you know, I'd sort of let me give me confidence to get involved in LGBT activism, say, and appear in local media and get involved with the trade union. Okay, I'll wind up now. So, you know, that gave me the confidence. But one of the reasons I wanted to do this talk was just saying, you know, you have a moment, like a realisation. I was on a train at work, I've been working for like 12 hours. This train was like, you know, I swear they have minds of their own nowadays because they've got so much computer things on, and there was alarms galore going off, there was fumes, there's noise, there's smells, and I thought, this is like an Aspie's worst nightmare in so many ways, and here I am actually doing it and getting on with it and making it work, and you know, and doing the things I've always wanted to do, and you know, and being determined. And you know, I think so many people don't see that because they don't realise how much work we put in to overcoming the difficulties that we have. You know, so things that are quite easy for other people, so difficult for us. And I think, you know, I was quite proud of myself at that moment. And I think, you know, my career's still got years, another 20 years probably to go. So it's sort of a long way to go. But, you know, I'm so glad I've got involved in going to the LGBT TUC thing through my trade union, through work next week in London. You know, I've got so much confidence. I mean, I wouldn't have even been able to come back here a couple of years ago, back to Reading, because it would have just flagged up all the failings for me. It would have just reminded me of where I went wrong, and I was a failure. I couldn't have even come back to this town a couple of years ago. I couldn't have faced it. You know what I mean? I couldn't have looked at the buildings I used to look at and go to the places I used to go to. It would have just been constantly flagging up this notion of me being a failure. So even coming here today, talking here today, and being in Reading, you know, a town that I've really come to really like now and engage with in a way that I didn't do when I actually lived here, because I felt so apart from everybody and everything. You know, it's just such a fantastic thing. And I think, you know, if young people are looking to get a job doing what they really want to do, you know, the best piece of advice, you know, say I'm so involved with the unions, I'm so pleased that I'm doing what I'm doing, but if those young people want to go into a work in an environment that's interesting but it's challenging, you know, I'd always say for them to join a trade union and make sure you get the support in place through a support group, through an advocate, because although I say I'm immensely proud of 30 years working full-time in the railway industry this year, and still got fond memory of first hot summer it was then, you know, in '89, just like this year. But you know, over those 30 years, the challenges I've had, the anxiety I've had, the nerves I've had, working 80 hours a week, not just the odd week, constantly for months on end at times, because I couldn't say no because I felt so insecure. And I wouldn't want to think that a young person, to be honest with you, would have to put up with that and go through what I had to go through. By all means, you know, people should work hard and strive for what they want, but they should find a sense of balance, and that way they should have an advocate. They should be able to tell their employers, and if they feel as if they can't tell their employers, is that really an employer that you want to work for, you know? And, you know, as I say, that is an important thing. And one of the things I've learned is this Northern Irish saying, which I really like, and it is, your health's your wealth. So if anybody's struggling at work, you know, make sure they engage with support services, because your health comes first. And thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for listening to me.
Yay!